My name is Madison Carter. I'm 32 years old. And 6 months ago, I learned that sometimes the most dangerous enemy in your life isn't a stranger. Sometimes it's the person who hugs you at family dinners, the person who smiles for photographs, the person who tells everyone how much she loves family. My mother-in-law, Evelyn Harper, had spent 5 years convincing people she was exactly that kind of woman. For 5 years, she made sure I knew I wasn't truly welcome. Never openly, never in ways anyone could easily prove. Just 1,000 tiny cuts, a forgotten dietary restriction, a comparison to one of Daniel's ex-girlfriends, a comment disguised as concern, a joke that somehow always landed on me. And every time I tried to explain it to my husband, Daniel would sigh and rub the back of his neck. That's just Mom. Maddie. I hated that sentence, not because Daniel meant any harm, but because it gave Evelyn permission to continue. By Thanksgiving of last year, I had reached the point where I could practically predict her behavior. What I couldn't predict was how far she was willing to go. The holiday dinner was being held at Evelyn and Richard's house. The atmosphere looked perfect from the outside. Turkey roasting, football playing in the background, Sophia scrolling through her phone while pretending not to judge everyone. The kind of family gathering that would look warm and happy in photographs, but families are experts at hiding cracks. That afternoon, I was helping in the kitchen, while Evelyn supervised everyone like a queen overseeing her kingdom. I had brought my own cranberry sauce, a gluten-free recipe I'd been making since college. Nobody ever touched it except me, which made what happened next even more chilling. Evelyn and her sister Margaret stepped onto the back porch. The kitchen window was cracked open slightly. I wasn't trying to listen. I wasn't snooping. I was rinsing a serving spoon when I heard my name. That made me pause. Then I heard Margaret's voice. Are you sure about this? Evaine. Silence. Then Evelyn laughed. Not her polite laugh. Not her company laugh. Her mean laugh. The one she used when she thought nobody important was listening. It'll be fine. Margaret sounded nervous. This feels excessive. Evelyn lowered her voice. But I could still hear enough. She's ruining everything. My heart skipped. Daniel isn't himself anymore. This family was perfectly fine before she came along. I froze. Water continued running over my hands. I didn't even notice. Then came the sentence that changed everything. A good, strong dose in that weird cranberry stuff she brings will clear her out for a while. The spoon slipped from my fingers. It clattered into the sink. I stood completely still. Margaret whispered something. I couldn't hear it. Evelyn answered, No one else eats that nonsense. A pause. Then, she'll think it's a stomach bug. The two women laughed. My stomach dropped. Suddenly, every instinct in my body was screaming, record this. Now. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. I opened the recorder, pressed record, and quietly moved closer. I only captured the final 30 seconds. But it was enough, more than enough. Serves her right. Evelyn's voice, crystal clear. Then another laugh. Then Margaret saying she hoped I wouldn't make a fuss. Then the recording ended. I stared at my phone screen. Mi puls hammer than mi ears. Part of me wanted to burst through the door. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to leave immediately. Instead, I did something much harder. I acted normal. I returned to the dining room. I smiled. I chatted. I accepted compliments. And when dinner started, I carefully avoided my cranberry sauce. Nobody noticed. At least nobody except Daniel. Later that evening, he wrapped an arm around my waist. You okay? I forced a smile. Just tired. He kissed my forehead. I felt guilty instantly. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because I was hiding something enormous. Something capable of destroying his family. Over the next few days, I listened to the recording again and again. Each time it sounded worse. Not better. Worse. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Evelyn's obsession with Daniel's former girlfriends, her insistence that I had changed him, her repeated claims that I wasn't really family. Suddenly, all those little moments felt connected, like pieces of a puzzle, a very ugly puzzle. Meanwhile, Evelyn carried on as though nothing had happened. She continued making comments, continued telling relatives I was divisive, continued acting like the victim. Then she announced a new family dinner. A dinner supposedly meant to clear the air. I remember reading the family group message while sitting on our couch. Daniel looked up from his laptop. "Mom wants everyone over next Saturday." I stared at the screen. My stomach tightened. To clear the air. Yeah. He laughed softly. Maybe this time everyone can finally get along. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen when he heard the truth. Would he believe me? Would he defend me? Or would he choose the woman who raised him? That question kept me awake for 3 nights. By the time Saturday arrived, I had made my decision. The recording was saved in 3 places. My phone, my laptop, a cloud backup. If the evening turned ugly, I wasn't staying silent anymore. I had spent 5 years trying to earn Evelyn's approval. 5 years trying to keep the peace. 5 years pretending her hostility wasn't personal. The recording changed everything. As Daniel and I pulled into his parents' driveway that evening, I looked at the glowing windows of the house. People were laughing inside. The scene looked normal, safe, ordinary. But I knew something nobody else knew. Before the night was over, one secret was going to explode. And when it did, this family would never be the same again. The moment Daniel and I walked through the front door, I could feel the tension waiting for us. Not the obvious kind, not shouting, not hostility, something quieter, more deliberate, like everyone had rehearsed their roles before we arrived. Evelyn greeted us with a smile that never reached her eyes. "There you are." She hugged Daniel, barely acknowledged me. The same routine she'd perfected over the years. Richard stood near the dining room, carrying a tray of drinks. He looked tired, older somehow. Sophia was already seated in the living room, scrolling through her phone. When she glanced up at me, her expression told me everything. She had been briefed. Whatever story Evelyn had been telling behind my back, Sophia had fully accepted it. I exchanged a glance with Daniel. He didn't seem to notice, or maybe he was too used to it. Dinner began normally enough. The smell of roast chicken filled the house. Silverware clinked. Small talk drifted around the table. But beneath it all, something felt off. Every conversation eventually circled back to family. Loyalty, respect, addition. The themes weren't accidental. Evelyn was building towards something. I could feel it. Halfway through dinner, she sighed dramatically. Then another sigh. Then another. Daniel finally looked up. "Everything okay?" "Mom." Evelyn pressed a hand against her chest. "Oh, I'm fine." The way she said it guaranteed everyone knew she wasn't fine. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Sophia rolled her eyes dramatically. "Mom's just upset." Evelyn looked wounded. No. It's okay." Pause. Then, some people simply don't understand family. There it was. The first shot. Daniel frowned. I remained silent. Evelyn continued. "I've always believed family should support each other." Another pause. "Not divide each other." Sophia immediately nodded. "Exactly." I noticed Richard staring down at his plate, not speaking, not defending anyone, just avoiding the explosion he knew was coming. For years, that had been his strategy. Avoid, endure, survive. Evelyn looked directly at me. The room suddenly felt smaller. Madison. Her voice turned sweet, dangerously sweet. "Dear, we need to talk." I set down my fork. "Okay." She smiled. The smile of someone convinced she was about to win. "Ever since you entered Daniel's life, this family has changed." Nobody spoke. There's tension everywhere. Another pause. Relationships have become strained. Daniel shifted in his chair. I could see discomfort growing across his face. "Still." He said nothing. Evelyn continued. "And frankly, most of it traces back to you." Silence. Heavy silence. Sophia crossed her arms. Richard closed his eyes briefly. The air felt frozen. This was the moment Evelyn had planned. The public humiliation. The intervention. The final opportunity to convince everyone that I was the problem. But something happened that she wasn't expecting. I didn't react. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply nodded. "I understand." Evelyn blinked, clearly caught off guard. She'd expected tears. Anger. A fight. Instead, I remained calm. Sophia jumped in. "Mom's right." "Madison." There was confidence in her voice. The confidence of someone who thinks the verdict has already been decided. "You make everything difficult." I looked at her, then at Evelyn, then finally at Daniel. My husband looked confused, like he knew something was wrong but couldn't quite see it yet. I took a slow breath. "Daniel." He immediately looked up. "Yeah. Can we talk privately for a minute?" Evelyn's smile faltered. "Just slightly." Daniel nodded. "Sure." We stood, without another word. We walked into Richard's study. The door closed behind us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Daniel looked concerned, muddy. His voice softened. "What's going on?" I stared at him. At the man I'd loved for years. The man standing between me and the family that wanted me gone. And suddenly I felt terrified. Not of Evelyn, not of Sophia, of this moment. Because once I showed him the recording, there would be no going back. Ever. I pulled out my phone. "There's something you need to hear." Daniel frowned. "What is it?" Instead of answering, I pressed play. The recording began. Static. Wind. Then voices. "Margaret." "Evelyn." Daniel listened quietly. At first he looked confused, then focused, then concerned, then pale. I watched every emotion cross his face. The transformation was painful, like watching someone discover a terrible truth in real time. A good strong dose. Evelyn's voice, clear, undeniable. Daniel froze. "She'll think it's a stomach bug." His jaw tightened. "Serves her right." Silence. The recording ended. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink, for several seconds. The room was completely still. Then he whispered, "No." I swallowed. "It's real." "No." His voice cracked. I had never heard Daniel sound like that before. Not once. He grabbed the phone, pressed play again, listened to the entire thing a second time. This time he paced back and forth, back and forth. His breathing grew heavier. His face flushed red. When the recording ended again, he stopped moving. Then, he looked at me. "What exactly were they talking about putting in your food?" "I don't know." His eyes widened. "You don't know?" I didn't stay long enough to hear the details. Daniel stared at the floor, then rubbed both hands across his face. "Oh my God." The words came out broken, like something inside him had shattered. "Daniel." "No." He shook his head. "No." His voice became stronger. "Angria. That's not Mom being difficult." I stayed silent. That's not her being overprotective. His hands clenched into fists. That's not a misunderstanding. The realization finally landed, hard. His eyes met mine. "She wanted to make you sick." I nodded. Daniel's face hardened. A look I'd never seen before. Not anger. Not exactly betrayal. Pure betrayal. For the first time, he wasn't seeing his mother. He was seeing a stranger. Then he said something that surprised even me. We're done hiding this. He opened the study door and walked straight back into the living room. I followed. The atmosphere instantly changed. Everyone noticed Daniel's expression. Evelyn stood first, concern flashing across her face. Daniel. He ignored the question. His voice came out dangerously calm. Mom. Something in his tone made the room freeze. Evelyn swallowed. What? Daniel took a step forward. What exactly is your special recipe for clearing someone out? The color drained from her face immediately. Richard looked confused. Sophia frowned. What are you talking about? Daniel didn't even look at her. His eyes remained fixed on Evelyn. Thanksgiving. Silence. You and Aunt Margaret. Evelyn's mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time in years. She genuinely looked afraid. The silence in the room lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. Long enough for everyone to realize something had gone terribly wrong. Evelyn looked from Daniel to me, and back again. Her confidence was gone. Completely gone. What are you talking about? She asked. The question sounded weak, forced. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone. I recognized the expression on his face. It was the look someone wears when they no longer care about protecting a lie. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Evelyn's eyes widened. Richard sat upright. Sophia frowned. Daniel continued. The conversation on Thanksgiving. The room grew still. The one about Madison's cranberry sauce. A flash of panic crossed Evelyn's face. Gone almost instantly. But not fast enough. I saw it. Daniel saw it too. So you remember? Danielle. The one where you talked about giving her a good, strong dose of something. Sophia laughed nervously. Mom would never do that. Daniel finally looked at his sister. The disappointment in his eyes made her stop smiling. Listen to this. He pressed play. The recording echoed through the room. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Nobody even breathed loudly. Evelyn's own voice filled the living room, clear, distinct, impossible to explain away. She'll think it's a stomach bug. Richard's face turned white. Sophia's eyes widened. Serves her right. Then silence. The recording ended. No one spoke. Evelyn looked trapped. Like an animal backed into a corner. Finally, she laughed. A sharp, nervous laugh. That's what this is about. Daniel stared at her. That's your response. It was a joke. Nobody answered. It was obviously a joke. Daniel's jaw tightened. A joke? Yes. She pointed toward me. She's twisting everything. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. The moment she realized denial wouldn't work, she blamed me. Exactly as I had expected. Richard spoke for the first time. Evaine. His voice sounded shaken. What were you talking about? Evelyn turned toward him, desperate now. Nothing. Richard didn't look convinced. Nothing. It was a conversation about making Madison sick. It was sarcasm. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. I know what sarcasm sounds like. Mom. Sophia suddenly stood. This is ridiculous. Her eyes were locked on me. She's turning everyone against us. There it was. Not concern. Not confusion. Blame. I had somehow become responsible for the recording Evelyn made herself. Daniel looked at his sister. Listen to yourself. Sophia crossed her arms. Mom didn't do anything. Then why is she lying? Nobody answered. The silence became unbearable. Evelyn finally exploded. This is exactly what she's been doing since she got here. She pointed at me. Manipulating you. Richard flinched. Daniel didn't. I heard your voice. Out of context. I heard your voice. It was edited. Daniel stared at her, then slowly shook his head. You know what's sad? Evelyn froze. For the first time in my life. I don't believe a word you're saying. The look on her face was devastating. Not because she was hurt, because she realized she was losing control. And Evelyn hated losing control. For years, she had been the center of every family decision. Every holiday. Every conflict. Every relationship. Now her son was standing against her. Publicly. And she couldn't stop it. She turned toward Richard. Say something. Richard looked exhausted. What do you want me to say? Defend me. He stared at the floor. Then at the phone in Daniel's hand. Then at me. I don't know if I can. Evelyn looked stunned. Sophia immediately moved to her mother's side. Mom doesn't deserve this. Daniel took a long breath. Then he said the sentence nobody expected. I'm calling the police. The room erupted. Evelyn gasped. Richard stood up. Sophia shouted, What? Daniel had already pulled out his phone. Daniel. Don't be ridiculous. His mother sounded panicked. Mom? His voice remained calm. Too calm. You discussed intentionally making my wife sick. It was a joke. You threatened her. No? You planned something. It wasn't serious. The excuses kept changing. Every few seconds. Every version contradicted the last. Daniel seemed to notice, so did Richard. The police arrived about 30 minutes later. Those 30 minutes were among the longest of my life. Nobody spoke much. Sophia glared at me. Evelyn cried. Richard paced. Daniel sat beside me without letting go of my hand. For the first time since I met him, I felt completely protected, not because he could solve everything, because he finally saw the truth. 2 officers entered the house. Professional, calm. They listened carefully. Daniel explained everything. The recording was played again. The officers took notes, asked questions, requested copies. Evelyn alternated between crying and becoming angry. At one point, she accused me of destroying the family. One officer immediately stopped her. The more she talked, the worse she sounded. Eventually, the officers stepped aside with Evelyn and Richard. The conversation lasted nearly 20 minutes. When they returned, no arrest was made. Not that night, but the officers made something very clear. The allegations were serious. Extremely serious. A report would be filed. Evidence would be reviewed. And further harassment would not be tolerated. Evelyn looked furious. Not relieved. Furious. As if she believed she was the victim. When the officers left, Sophia rounded on Daniel. How could you do this? Daniel looked at her. His expression never changed. How could I do what? Call the police on Mom. Daniel's answer came instantly. How could she threaten my wife? Sophia opened her mouth, then closed it. Because there was no answer. Not a good one. Richard sat heavily on the couch. He suddenly looked 10 years older. The family he had spent decades trying to hold together was falling apart right in front of him. And everyone knew it. As Daniel and I walked toward the door, Evelyn called after us, You're making a mistake. We stopped. Not because we cared. Because her voice sounded different. Cold. Very cold. Daniel turned. Evelyn stared directly at me. The tears were gone. The panic was gone. Only anger remained. You'll regret this. A chill ran through me. The words sounded less like a warning, more like a promise. Daniel stepped between us immediately. If you contact Madison again, it goes through an attorney. Then he opened the door, and we left. The drive home was quiet. Dark roads stretched ahead of us. Streetlights flashed across the windshield. For nearly 20 minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel finally broke the silence. I should have listened sooner. I turned toward him. What? Every time you told me, something felt wrong. His eyes stayed on the road. I kept making excuses. I reached for his hand. Daniel, no. His voice cracked slightly. "I failed you." The pain in his expression hurt more than anything Evelyn had ever done. Because it was real, he wasn't protecting himself. He wasn't defending his mother. He was grieving the woman he thought she was. What neither of us realized that night was that the recording had only destroyed one illusion. The real battle was still ahead. Because Evelyn Harper wasn't the type of woman to accept consequences, and over the next few weeks, she would prove exactly how far she was willing to go. 3 weeks after Daniel called the police, the retaliation began. Not openly, not at first. Evelyn was smarter than that. She understood that direct attacks could be documented, could be used against her, so instead, she chose something more subtle, something poisonous. Rumors. The first sign appeared on social media. A distant cousin messaged me, asking if I was okay. The question seemed innocent, until I asked why. There was a pause. Then she sent screenshots, posts about toxic daughters-in-law, posts about women who manipulate husbands, posts about people who destroy families and play the victim afterward. No names, but everyone knew who the target was. Sophia had shared every one of them, sometimes with comments, sometimes with emojis, sometimes with dramatic captions about loyalty and betrayal. The message was clear. I was the villain. Evelyn was the victim. The campaign spread surprisingly fast. Family members started choosing sides. Some reached out privately. Others disappeared completely. A few unfriended me online. One aunt stopped responding to messages. Another relative posted vague comments about respecting elders. It felt like watching a disease spread, slowly, relentlessly. Then they crossed a new line. One Tuesday morning, I was called into Human Resources. I remember the feeling vividly. The knot in my stomach, the cold sensation in my hands, the fear that something had happened at work. Instead, HR showed me an anonymous complaint. According to the letter, I was emotionally unstable, manipulative, prone to fabricating stories, a danger to workplace morale. My boss looked embarrassed. "We know this isn't true." I sat there silently. The language was too familiar, too personal. Whoever wrote it knew details about my life. The complaint wasn't random. It was targeted. The moment I left the meeting, I called Daniel. His reaction was immediate. "They're escalating." I agreed. The same afternoon, we scheduled a consultation with an attorney. By then, I was done hoping things would calm down on their own. The attorney reviewed everything: the recording, the screenshots, the anonymous complaint, the timeline, every text, every voicemail, every message. After nearly 2 hours, she leaned back in her chair. "This is harassment." Hearing a professional say it out loud was strangely validating. For months, I had questioned myself, wondered if I was overreacting, wondered if I had somehow caused this. Now the truth sat plainly on the table. I wasn't imagining anything. Evelyn and Sophia were actively trying to hurt me. The recording was professionally transcribed, notarized, preserved. Every piece of evidence was organized into a growing file. Then the cease and desist letters were sent, one to Evelyn, one to Sophia. The letters outlined the harassment, referenced the recording, documented the workplace complaint, warned them that future misconduct could result in legal action. Their responses arrived quickly, and they were spectacularly bad. Evelyn left Daniel a 5-minute voicemail. At first she cried, then she blamed me, then she claimed the recording was edited, then she claimed she had done nothing wrong, then she demanded an apology. The contradictions were almost impressive. Sophia was less subtle. She sent Daniel a series of angry texts, calling him weak, calling me manipulative, accusing us of destroying the family. We saved every message, forwarded every one to our attorney. The evidence folder continued growing. Meanwhile, Daniel began researching something that neither of us could stop thinking about. What exactly had Evelyn intended to put into my food? The answer disturbed us deeply. Evelyn loved gardening. Her backyard contained dozens of plants, some harmless, some not. As Daniel researched, he discovered several species capable of causing severe gastrointestinal distress if improperly used. The exact ingredient remained uncertain, but the pattern was clear. This hadn't been about a harmless prank. The goal had been suffering, pain, humiliation. The realization left me shaken. For weeks afterward, I struggled to trust food prepared by other people. At restaurants, I checked meals twice. At gatherings, I watched everything. Anxiety became an unwelcome companion. Daniel noticed. One evening, he found me staring at a plate of food. "You don't have to force yourself." I looked up. "I know." He sat beside me. "I'm sorry." The apology surprised me. "You didn't do this." "No." His voice was quiet. "But I should have protected you sooner." I leaned against him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The attack that was supposed to destroy our marriage had somehow strengthened it. We had become a team. The same couldn't be said for Evelyn's family. Months passed. Then, Sophia made a mistake. A very expensive mistake. Ignoring the cease and desist letter, she posted a lengthy rant on a local community Facebook page. This time, she didn't stay vague. This time, she directly accused me of lying, of fabricating evidence, of manipulating Daniel. Within hours, our attorney had screenshots. Within 24 hours, Sophia received another legal notice. The post disappeared almost immediately, but the damage was done. The violation became part of our case. 4 months after the cease and desist letters, we finally entered a courtroom. The criminal investigation into the original threat had concluded. No felony charges. The burden of proof was simply too high. But the civil case was different. Very different. The judge reviewed everything. The recording, the harassment timeline, the HR complaint, the social media posts, the cease and desist violations. Every piece fit together. Evelyn cried repeatedly, claimed she loved me like a daughter, claimed she was misunderstood, claimed she was being persecuted. The performance might have worked years earlier. Not anymore. Not with evidence, not with documentation, not with a recording. Daniel testified, calmly, clearly, honestly. He described hearing the recording, described his mother's behavior afterward, described the harassment campaign. The courtroom became silent. Even Evelyn stopped crying. Then the judge listened to the recording personally. When it ended, she removed her glasses and looked directly at Evelyn. That look alone told me everything. The decision came later that afternoon. A 2-year restraining order. Against both Evelyn and Sophia. No contact. No message. No social media references. No approaching our home. No approaching my workplace. No. Coming within 100 yards of me, the judge specifically referenced Evelyn's lack of remorse and escalating behavior. I remember walking out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in months. Not victorious. Just free. The fallout was immediate. Relatives who had believed Evelyn began changing their minds. Some reached out to apologize. Others quietly distanced themselves from her. Richard eventually contacted us. The conversation was difficult, emotional, but genuine. For the first time, he openly acknowledged what had happened. For the first time, he stopped defending it. He apologized, repeatedly, and although the relationship would never fully recover, it was a beginning. Evelyn, meanwhile, became increasingly isolated. Her relationship with Daniel effectively ended. Her access to our lives disappeared. Future holidays, future celebrations, future grandchildren, gone. Not because of me, because of her own choices. The moment that truly drove the lesson home happened at a family wedding several months later. Daniel and I attended. Many relatives were there, laughing, talking, enjoying themselves. For years, Evelyn had ruled those gatherings like a queen, but this time her chair was empty. So was Sophia's. People noticed, some whispered, others openly discussed the restraining order. The truth had finally reached everyone. As I watched family members enjoying themselves without the usual tension, something unexpected happened. I felt peace, not revenge, not satisfaction. Peace. The constant anxiety was gone. The constant criticism was gone. The constant manipulation was gone. Daniel slipped his hand into mine. "You okay?" I smiled. For the first time in a long time. The answer came easily. "Yeah." And I meant it. 6 months earlier, Evelyn Harper had tried to force me out of the family. She had spent years believing she could control every relationship around her. But life has a way of exposing people. Eventually, masks slip. Truth surfaces. Choices carry consequences. In the end, Evelyn achieved exactly the opposite of what she wanted. She wanted me gone. Instead, she removed herself. She built the walls. She locked the door. And then she found herself trapped inside. Daniel and I moved forward. Stronger. Happier. Free from the chaos she created. Our home became peaceful again. Our future became ours again. And whenever I think back to that conversation outside the kitchen window, I remember one simple truth. The woman who wanted to clear me out of the family ended up clearing herself out instead.